Think about where you are financially right now. Not where you want to be, not where you plan to be by this point, where you actually are. You're probably working, probably earning a decent income. Maybe you have some savings, maybe a 401k you contribute to when you remember. You're not reckless with money. You don't blow paychecks on things you don't need. You're doing the responsible stuff, more or less. And yet, there's a number in your head, a net worth you thought you'd have by now. And there's a gap between that number and your reality that you can't fully explain. You're not alone in that gap. Most middle-class families live there permanently. There is a line, one specific financial line that separates the people who close that gap from the people who don't. It has nothing to do with income, nothing to do with discipline, nothing to do with how hard you work or how smart you are. Most middle-class families never cross it, not because they can't, because no one ever shows them where it is. That's what this video is about. To show you exactly what this line looks like in practice, I want you to meet two people. Darius and Sofia. Same city, same age, same starting salary 15 years ago, $65,000 a year. Both had decent credit, both were doing what everyone told them to do. Work hard, save a little, don't go crazy with spending. Today, Darius has a net worth of just under $40,000, a 401k with about $18,000 in it, a car that's almost paid off, some furniture. He feels okay about it. Not great, but okay. Sofia has a net worth of $480,000, investments, retirement accounts, and home equity combined. Same city, same starting salary, 15 years. The difference isn't luck. It isn't inheritance. It isn't some investing tip one of them stumbled across at the right moment. The difference is a single decision, one that Darius never made and Sofia made deliberately in her early 30s because someone finally explained what it was. Most of us grow up with the same mental model of money. You earn it, you spend what you need, you save what's left, and if there's enough left, maybe you invest a little. The whole system is built around the paycheck. It comes in, it goes out. That's the rhythm. That's what feels normal. And inside that rhythm, you can do really well on the surface. You can own a home, take vacations, buy new cars, put your kids through school. You can look from the outside like someone who has figured it out. But that ceiling has a hard one. And most people don't feel it until they're in their late 40s, looking at their retirement projections, realizing the numbers don't add up the way they thought they would. Darius hit that ceiling. Sofia broke through it. The difference wasn't income. It wasn't that Sofia stopped enjoying her life or cut out every luxury or drove a worse car. The difference was one decision about which direction her money moved first. Before we break that down, I want you to understand why this decision feels so counterintuitive, because that's the part nobody talks about. Your brain is not naturally wired to build wealth. The way human beings process financial decisions is shaped by behavioral patterns that evolved for scarcity, not abundance. Patterns that made perfect sense 10,000 years ago and quietly work against you every payday. The most powerful of those patterns is something behavioral economists call present bias. It's the tendency to assign dramatically more value to things available right now compared to identical things available in the future. $1 today feels worth more than $1 next year, even when the math says otherwise. This is why saving feels like sacrifice. This is why investing feels abstract. This is why the system Darius is running, earn, spend, save what's left, is the default for almost everyone. It follows the path of least psychological resistance. Spend now, save later, invest someday. The line Darius never crossed is the line between that system and a completely different one. Let's look at what that line actually is. The line has a name in personal finance circles. It's called paying yourself first. But that phrase has been repeated so many times it's lost all its meaning. People hear it and nod and do nothing because it sounds like advice about saving more, and they already know they should save more. That's not what it means. Paying yourself first doesn't mean putting money aside before you go out to dinner. It means building a financial system where the first thing your money does, before bills, before groceries, before anything, is work for you. It means your income flows through investment and savings vehicles before it ever enters your spending account. It sounds like a minor procedural change. It is not. It's the most structurally significant thing you can do with your money, and here's why. When you save what's left after spending, you are spending down to zero and hoping something remains. Most months, not much does. Life expands to fill available income. This is called lifestyle inflation, and it's one of the most reliable patterns in behavioral economics. Every raise you get, your expenses quietly adjust upward. The gap never gets much wider, no matter how much more you earn. When you invest before spending, the system works in reverse. Your lifestyle is built around what's left after your money goes to work. Suddenly, lifestyle inflation has a ceiling, the ceiling of your spending account balance. And your investment balance grows steadily, automatically, without depending on your willpower or your mood or whether it was a stressful month. Sofia figured this out at 31. She set up an automatic transfer on the day her paycheck hit. 15% went to her investment account before she saw it. She didn't miss it in any meaningful way. Within a few months, her spending had quietly adjusted to match what remained. The system ran on autopilot. Darius kept planning to invest more once things settled down. Things didn't settle down. They never do. Before we get into the psychology, because this is where it gets really interesting, if you're watching this and it's already landing for you, subscribe. This channel is built entirely around the behavioral side of money, why people make the decisions they make, and what actually changes outcomes. There's a lot more like this. Now, back to Darius. Now, here is where the psychology gets interesting, and this is the part that explains why so few people cross this line even when they understand it intellectually. Crossing the line requires a specific kind of discomfort, not the discomfort of having less, though there's some of that. The discomfort of watching money go somewhere you can't immediately use it, and trusting that the future value of that action is real, even though you can't feel it today. This is present bias again, working against you. The sacrifice is immediate and tangible. The reward is distant and abstract. Your brain weights them unequally every time, and the tilt is always toward now. Behavioral researchers call the solution a commitment device. You remove future you from the decision entirely. You automate the transfer so that present you never gets to vote. The money moves before you see it, before you feel it, before your brain argues you need it for something else. Sofia didn't out-discipline Darius, she out-designed him. The system did the work willpower was never going to do consistently. Here's what happened over 15 years when the system ran without interruption. At a 15% savings rate, invested in a diversified index portfolio starting at $65,000 a year, Sofia's money compounded quietly while she lived her life. She bought a home, she traveled, she didn't feel like she was sacrificing anything. But every month, her future net worth was being built automatically, the way Darius's spending was, just in the opposite direction. The line isn't between rich and poor. It's not between people who let their system build their future on autopilot and people who keep trying to find the willpower to do it manually. Willpower loses every time. The system wins. So what does crossing the line actually look like in practice? It's simpler than most people expect, and it doesn't require a dramatic income increase, a new job, or a financial advisor with a $5,000 onboarding fee. It requires 3 things. First, you need to decide on a percentage, not an amount, a percentage. The reason is important. An amount is static. If you decide to invest $300 a month and your income goes up, you invest $300 a month. A percentage scales automatically. 15% is a strong target. If that feels impossible right now, start at 5 and increase by 1% every 6 months. The starting number matters far less than the consistency. Second, you need to automate it. Not plan to automate it, not write it on your to-do list. Open your bank account today and set up a recurring transfer from your checking account to an investment account, a brokerage, a Roth IRA, a 401k contribution increase, scheduled for the day after your paycheck hits. If the money leaves before you log in, you will adjust to it within a few months. If the money stays visible in your account while you decide whether to invest it, you will not invest it. This is not a character flaw. It is how human cognition works. Third, you need to leave it alone. This is where the psychology gets hardest for most people, because the market goes down sometimes, often dramatically, and present bias will tell you that protecting what you have is smarter than staying the course. It is not. The research on this is among the most consistent in all of personal finance. Long-term returns for investors who stay invested through downturns dramatically outperform the returns of people who exit and try to re-enter at the right time. The right time never feels right. Staying in always feels scary, and staying in is almost always correct. Let's go back to Darius and Sofia one more time. Darius is not a failure. He's not irresponsible. He worked hard for 15 years and accumulated $40,000, which by the numbers puts him well behind most Americans his age. But he stayed on the wrong side of the line. He trusted that saving what was left would eventually add up to something significant. It didn't compound because it wasn't consistent. It wasn't consistent because it depended on willpower. And willpower, deployed against present bias, is a losing strategy. Sofia crossed the line. She built a system. She didn't think about investing every month. The system thought for her. And 15 years later, the gap between them is not a reflection of character or intelligence or effort. It is the compounding effect of a single structural decision, made once, automated, and left alone. You are watching this video because some part of you suspects that what you're currently doing isn't going to get you where you want to go. That suspicion is worth listening to. The line is real. Most middle-class families never cross it, not because they can't, but because no one ever made it this clear where it is or why it matters. You know where it is now. The next step is simple. Not easy. Simple. Decide on a percentage. Automate the transfer, leave it alone. If this video gave you something to think about, subscribe. We cover the behavioral side of money every week. Not tips, not trends. The actual psychology behind why people make the financial decisions they make and what you can do differently. That's what this channel is built on. See you next week.